tributes continue to flow in for Indigenous leader Yunupingu, who has died at the age of 74. Let's bring in someone that knew him very well, Professor Marcia Langton, who's also been the co-chair of the Indigenous Voice to Parliament Design Group. Professor Langton, thanks for your time. How will Yunupingu, his life and legacy, be remembered?
So, in the 1970s, he was a very young man, and he was delegated by his... can you change the screenshot, please? He was delegated by his father to interpret for Justice Woodward. But even before that, he was an interpreter in the Millipum case, which was in the 1960s. So because he had a good education, he was fluent in his own language and other Yunga Mata languages and in English. He was a brilliant interpreter. Even as a teenager, he was given these responsibilities, and he was also quite well trained in all the ceremonial matters, and that continued throughout his life. And so he became an extremely knowledgeable person at a young age, and was trusted by the clans. He helped to interpret for the very first petition in the Australian Parliament in an Aboriginal language, and that was the Year Galarrwuy petition. So he played a role in culture and politics and making representations to Australian governments from the 1960s. And so over decades, he ended up being the leader from that part of the world who met with prime ministers and ministers of government and parliamentary committees. And so he became an accomplished politician and representative. And a highly trusted one. And he spoke to every government, and he always took a balanced view of matters, and he took his responsibilities very, very seriously. He was elected twice as chair of the Northern Land Council, chairman of the Northern Land Council. And this was back in the days when any Aboriginal person like him who represented his people was a figure that was loathed by politicians. And, it was reminded by Chips McAnulty's obituary this morning that Shane Stone said unkind things about him. But I want to add that eventually even Shane Stone, who was the hard man of the Old Country Liberal Party, as it was then, became friends with Galarrwuy. He was a wonderful person, a raconteur. He was charming. He had a great intellect, and he was a great thinker and strategist. And so every Northern Territory chief minister who took him on usually failed in their attacks on him because he understood politics better than they did. He understood both the Yolngu system and Aboriginal systems that he was representing, and he also understood the Australian system of government, parliaments and so on. And so, people constantly underestimated him to their peril. So in many ways, he was instrumental in the recognition of land rights in the Northern Territory, because as an interpreter, he gave Justice Woodward the evidence that enabled him as a very senior lawyer and jurist to translate ancient cultural concepts into legislation in the Northern Territory. That's worked very well since the 1970s. He was also instrumental in devising the notion of constitutional recognition, because he understood the existential threat that Aboriginal people have been under for 250 years, and he felt it especially in relation to his own people. So his own father and his father's generation saw the arrival of the first hotel in their part of the world. So the new mine brought in thousands of workers, alcohol, and a supermarket. And elders at that time were incredibly worried about the impact as they saw more and more deaths from the consumption of alcohol. And there was a parliamentary inquiry into this. So this wonderful man came into the world when his people were in the middle of the most tumultuous part of their history. He became a leader, both in his own culture and a bridge across between the cultures and between governmental systems. And he was able to steer people in the right direction and with great wisdom and grace. So his idea of constitutional recognition, he explained to Noel Pearson and me some years ago, and he wanted a balance. He saw how the Constitution represented all of the people who'd come to Australia but had no representation for the people who'd long been here before they came, and particularly his own people, and he wanted constitutional recognition. He organised his people twice to present petitions to first Prime Minister Gillard and then Prime Minister Rudd on the matter of constitutional recognition. And he played a role from that time onwards until last week in steering people towards a good outcome.
So
and last week,
we've only got a. I'm sorry, we've only got a minute left, but I do want to get your assessment. Was he optimistic about the Voice getting up later this year?
He was, I think, gracious when the Prime Minister spoke to him. I was not privy to the conversation, but the Prime Minister did speak to him on Zoom, and his family were surrounding him. And the Prime Minister gave him a message of hope. We're all heartbroken that he didn't live to see the outcome, of course. So I do hope that the referendum is successful, because it will be in very large part as a result of his work and in honour of him. And it gives all of us more inspiration to be as strong as he was in striving for a real sense of equality under the Constitution.
Professor Marcia Langton, I appreciate your time today to reflect on what was an extraordinary legacy and one of the greatest Australians, as the Prime Minister, Mr Albanese, described Yunupingu today, not just a great, but one of the greatest Australians. So thank you for your time and your reflections on an incredible life. Thank you.
Thank you.